I should begin by stating, for the record, that we, xenobiologists of the Trihelix Consortium, have studied Deathworld ecosystems for over 6,000 cycles. We have catalogued predators capable of crushing armored exoshells. We have documented venom so potent it liquefies neural tissue within seconds. We have observed atmospheric conditions that turn breathable air into corrosive mist. We are not easily disturbed. And yet, what I witnessed at what humans casually called the zoo nearly caused a full nervous system shutdown in 3 of my lower auxiliary lobes. It was not the predators. It was not the containment architecture. It was the humans. The facility was enormous. A sprawling open-air complex embedded into the side of a coastal megacity, all glass and flowing pathways and bright artificial sunlight filters. At first glance, it appeared recreational. That alone was already concerning. Recreation and apex predators are not concepts that coexist in any known stable civilization. And yet here it was. Humans walking casually along elevated platforms. Children laughing. Vendors selling compressed nutrient snacks. And everywhere, glass enclosures. Behind them, deaths. I recorded my first field note immediately. Subject species appears to be voluntarily exposing itself to multiple apex predatory organisms without protective fear response behavior. I then added a second note. This may indicate either extreme cognitive superiority or catastrophic survival negligence. At the time, I believed the second option more likely. The first enclosure contained what human signage labeled a lion, a quadrupedal apex carnivore with muscle density exceeding that of most armored ground predators. It paced behind reinforced, transparent alloy glass. Its gaze tracked movement with predatory precision. It was hungry. That much was obvious. What was less obvious was why the humans were sitting only meters away from it. Eating. A juvenile human pressed its palms against the glass. The lion reacted instantly. Muscle tension increased. Pupils locked. It approached the barrier with clear intent. The juvenile laughed. I nearly fell backward from shock response. Get back, I transmitted instinctively through my translator unit, far louder than intended. A nearby human glanced at me, smiled, offered what I later learned was called popcorn. I refused, obviously. I was not going to ingest food while watching imminent death. The lion struck the glass. Full force. The barrier did not break. The humans reacted by laughing harder. One of them even took a recording device and said something about good angle. I began to reconsider every assumption I had ever made about intelligent life. We moved deeper into the facility. Each enclosure contained something worse. A scaled river predator capable of severing limbs in a single snap. A feathered ambush hunter that moved faster than ocular tracking systems could stabilize. A subterranean burrowing organism that could detect heartbeats through solid stone. All of them contained, barely, and all of them watched the humans with increasing agitation. Not because they feared them, but because they could not reach them. And the humans, they leaned closer, pointed, discussed coloration patterns, argued about feeding schedules, made jokes. One of them said, "Bet he's cranky today." It referred to a creature that, in any natural environment, would have been classified as an extinction-level encounter. Cranky. I began to experience what I can only describe as cognitive dissonance hemorrhage. Nothing aligned. Nothing made sense. There were no visible predator suppression fields, no heavy deterrent weaponry, no emergency evacuation protocols being triggered. Just glass and humans and monsters. I turned to my assigned human liaison, a young male specimen named Daniel Reyes. He was eating a spiraled fried nutrient product, casually, as if surrounded by apex Deathworld fauna was equivalent to sitting in a botanical garden. You are in proximity to multiple lethal organisms, I stated. Yeah, he replied, chewing, it's a zoo. That is not a sufficient safety justification. He looked at me, paused, swallowed, then said, they're in there. I blinked all 3 ocular clusters. Yes, that is the problem. He frowned slightly. No, I mean, they're not out here. I recorded that exchange as subject displays complete absence of perceived threat differentiation between self and apex predator containment boundaries. We continued forward. The deeper we went, the more severe the specimens became. Each enclosure represented a higher tier of biological threat classification. And yet, human presence density increased accordingly. Mori families, Mori children, Mori relaxation. At one point, I observed a human child tapping on the glass of a massive armored reptilian predator. The predators struck the barrier. The child giggled. The parent did not react, not even a glance of concern. I nearly requested immediate planetary evacuation protocols. Then I noticed something subtle. The predators were not behaving normally. They were agitated, not at the humans, at the barriers, at confinement, at something they could not understand. They paced, they tested boundaries. They watched humans not as prey, but as something else, something unfamiliar, something unafraid. Still, I maintained my conclusion. This was a catastrophic safety failure waiting to happen. It was only a matter of time. And then, it happened. A loud metallic crack echoed through the lower enclosure sector. I froze. Multiple containment readings spiked simultaneously. A structural maintenance fault. Barrier instability detected. One of the lower predator habitats had suffered a partial containment breach. My internal systems immediately initiated emergency survival projections. Mortality rate for surrounding humans, 97.4%. Escalation probability. Total ecosystem collapse within 4.6 minutes. I turned, expecting panic, expecting screams, expecting evacuation protocols. Instead, a nearby human side looked down at the commotion and said, "Oh, not again." The moment the containment fault triggered, my entire predictive lattice collapsed into emergency recalibration mode. Not metaphorically, literally. 3 separate analytical cores flagged simultaneous extinction probability spikes. A breach in a Deathworld predator enclosure is not a minor incident. It is a cascading ecosystem failure event. On any civilized world, alarms would already be screaming. Evacuation corridors would be sealing. Defense systems would be activating in layers of escalating lethality. Here there was popcorn. I turned toward the breach sector. A section of reinforced glass had developed a structural fracture pattern along its lower quadrant. Inside the enclosure, a Titan-class ridgefang, classified in our taxonomy as Apex Hypercarnivore, Class 4 annihilation threat, had stopped packing. It had noticed the weakness. That alone was enough to trigger instinctive survival recall responses across my nervous substrate. It moved, slowly at first, testing, then faster. Its claws struck the weakened barrier again. A second fracture spidered outward. And still, no alarms, no containment lockdown, no human evacuation. Just murmurs, annoyed murmurs. That maintenance guy gonna get chewed out, one human said. Another sighed. I told them that panel was overdue. A child pointed. Mom, is it gonna break? The mother replied without even looking. Nah, they fix it quick. I processed that statement with increasing psychological distress. Fix it quick. A Class 4 apex predator was currently attempting to breach its containment field. Fix it quick. I turned to Daniel Reyes. You are in immediate danger, I stated. He glanced at me, then at the enclosure, then shrugged. Yeah, probably, he said. He took another bite of his food. The ridgefang struck again. The glass groaned. A fracture widened. This was it. The breach threshold. Once that barrier failed, nothing inside that enclosure would remain contained. And there were at least 7 additional enclosures in the immediate vicinity. Chain reaction probability catastrophic. Still, humans did not move. Not yet. Not even slightly. Then I saw it. A human worker on the lower maintenance walkway, walking toward the breach zone. Alone. No visible heavy armament. No escort. Just a small handheld device and what looked like a tool belt. My translator system flagged this as suicidal approach behavior. I prepared to intervene. The worker reached the fractured enclosure. The ridgefang noticed. It turned fully toward them. Muscles coiling. Jaw unhinging slightly. Drool impact analysis confirmed acidic composition. The human worker sighed. Actually sighed. Then tapped the glass panel twice. Till they said, the ridgefang attacked. Full force. Entire body launched against the breach point. The glass shattered outward. And then stopped. Mid-failure. Because the outer layer did not break. Only the inner sacrificial panel had failed. A secondary containment layer engaged instantly. The creature slammed into an invisible kinetic field and rebounded with concussive force. It roared. The human worker stepped forward. Still alone, still calm, pressed a hand to their wrist device. Containment layer 2 engaged, they said casually. Then added, yeah, that panel was overdue. I stared. This was not panic response. This was procedural correction. During an active Class 4 breach attempt, the worker entered the enclosure maintenance hatch. The ridgefang turned toward them immediately. This was the moment of death. There was no alternative outcome path that did not end in immediate biological termination. I calculated every branch. All ended the same way. The worker stepped inside, closed the door behind them. Silence. Then, movement. Not chaotic, not defensive. Controlled. The ridgefang lunged. The human stepped aside. Not quickly, not desperately, efficiently, like they had done this before. Many times, the creature struck again. Missed. Again. Missed. Each movement from the human was minimal. No wasted energy. No panic, just positioning. And then, the human spoke. Hey, just that. One syllable. The Ridgefang hesitated. It hesitated. A Class 4 apex carnivore. Paused. Mid-kill sequence. Because a human spoke to it. The worker adjusted their stance. Yeah, no, they said, you're not getting out. Then they moved. What followed cannot be classified as combat in any traditional sense. It was containment enforcement. The human guided the creature, not overpowering it, redirecting it, forcing it toward a reinforced drop corridor. Every strike from the predator missed by margins that suggested anticipation rather than reaction. Within 30 seconds, the Ridgefang was inside a containment subchamber. The door sealed. Locking protocols engaged. Secondary sedation gas deployed. Creature collapsed. The human worker exhaled. Then said, "All right, someone writing a report on that one," and walked out. I had observed many species engage apex threats. With weapons, with strategy, with overwhelming force. What I had just witnessed was none of those. It was familiarity. I turned back to Daniel Reyes. "You are not concerned," I stated. He shrugged again. They'll fix it. That was a lethal containment breach." "Yeah," he said, "it happens sometimes. It happens sometimes." I reviewed my emotional stability parameters. They were no longer stable. Before I could continue analysis, a second alarm triggered. Then a third. Then a cascade. Multiple enclosures. Simultaneous failure. The zoo's central display shattered into coordinated chaos. Glass ruptures. Containment locks failing. Predators reacting to freedom signals. Roars echoing across sectors. And still, humans did not flee. They stood, looked up, and sighed. "Oh, come on," one said. "I just sat down," said another. Then, movement changed. Human staff activated. Not panicked. Not disorganized. Coordinated. One tapped a wrist device. All sectors breach protocol yellow 9. Another replied instantly. Copy heard to funnel zones. A third. North wing evac complete. Animals are moving as expected. Animals. Not monsters. Not extinction events. Animals. I froze. Because I finally understood something critical. The zoo was not failing. It was performing. This was not containment collapse. It was controlled redirection. Every breach pathway led somewhere. Every escape route had structure. Every predator had a predicted response chain. The humans were not reacting to chaos. They were executing a system built for it. And then, I saw it. A large observation platform filled with humans watching the chaos below. Not fleeing. Not even tense. Watching. Some eating. Some recording. Some cheering. One human said, "Ooh, that one almost made it past gate 3. Another replied, "Nah, Keeper's already on it." Keeper. The term struck something in my cognition lattice. Not soldier. Not guard. Keeper. I turned slowly toward Daniel Reyes. "What is this place?" I asked. He looked at me. At the chaos below. At the roaring predators. At the calmly moving humans. Then said, "It's a zoo," and smiled. That was the moment my classification system failed entirely. Because I had been wrong from the beginning. The predators were not the apex threat. They were the exhibits. The system did not collapse. That was the first impossibility. It should have. By every known biological containment model, by every safety architecture standard across 3 federated star clusters. It should have collapsed. Instead, it shifted. Like a living organism adjusting posture under pressure. Multiple enclosures were now compromised. Not fully breached in the catastrophic sense I had originally assumed, but destabilized. Predators were moving. Roars echoed through overlapping habitat sectors. Glass vibrated under coordinated impacts. Containment grids flashed as they compensated for sudden load redistribution. And still, human visitors remained seated, observing, eating, reacting like this was entertainment. I felt something dangerously close to panic begin to form in my lower neural clusters. "You are not evacuating," I stated again, more urgently. A nearby human looked at me with mild confusion. "Why would we?" they asked. "Multiple apex predators are actively attempting escape." "Yeah," they said, "and staff's already on it." Then they returned to watching. Staff. That word again. Not soldiers. Not emergency response units. Staff. A loud impact reverberated from the northern enclosure stack. A heavy predator, this one aquatic, armored, capable of crushing reinforced hull plating, had breached a secondary barrier and spilled into a transit corridor. It moved fast. Too fast. A living disaster wave. I prepared for mass casualty projection recalculation. Then, a human stepped into its path. Alone. No armor plating. No visible weapon system. Just a simple uniform and a handheld restraint device. My predictive core immediately flagged. Fatal interception event. Probability of survival negligible. The predator lunged. Full mass acceleration. Walls cracked under pressure wave alone. The human did not retreat. Did not brace. Did not even widen stance. They raised the device. Pressed a button. A tone sounded. Zovd. Almost polite. The predator stopped. Mid-motion. Stopped. Not slowed. Not hindered. Stopped. Like reality had been told to pause. I could not process it at first. No known field technology should produce that effect at such range without visible energy discharge. There was no kinetic suppression wave. No neural disruptor field. No gravitational dampening. Nothing. Just a sound. The human walked forward, placed a hand on the creature's head, and said, "Back to enclosure." The predator obeyed. It turned, walked, returned to containment. Voluntarily, I experienced a full cognitive segmentation fault. That should not be possible. Not biologically, not evolutionarily, not physically. I turned toward Daniel Reyes again. He was watching the same scene. Calm, unsurprised, almost bored. That, I said slowly, was an apex Deathworld organism responding to auditory command. Yep, he said. No coercive force was observed. Yep. No visible control mechanism exists. Also, yep. I paused. Explain. He shrugged. They train them. That statement should have meant nothing. But it did not. Because it recontextualized everything. Train, not contain. Not suppress. Not imprison. Train. The predators were not being held in fear. They were being conditioned, structured, managed. I turned back toward the enclosures. The chaos was still present, but now it had patterned. Human staff moved through breach zones with calm precision. Every escaped predator was intercepted, not violently, but predictably. Guided, redirected, returned. And then I saw something worse. Something I had missed entirely. The predators were not trying to kill humans. They were trying to escape into specific corridors. Corridors that humans were actively herding them away from. Like shepherds. Like handlers. Like... No, I whispered. A nearby human laughed. Clever girl almost made it to Gate 5, they said. Another replied. Yeah, she's learning the layout faster this time. Learning. The predators were being observed. Studied. Improved. I turned to Daniel again. You are allowing them to escape. He nodded. Sort of. That is irrational. It's enrichment. I paused. Enrichment. He gestured vaguely toward the enclosures. They're smart. If you don't let them push boundaries, they get bored. Bored animals get sloppy. Animals. Again. Not monsters. Not threats. Animals. My internal systems began revising terminology models at accelerating speed. Then, a deeper alarm sounded. Not from a single enclosure, but from multiple sectors simultaneously. A full synchronization failure. 3 major predator habitats had experienced coordinated structural stress events. Not random, not isolated, coordinated, and worse, they were converging. I stared at the data. This is a containment cascade, I said. No, Daniel replied. It is, I insisted. He shook his head. It's a feeding schedule. I froze. What? He pointed. Watch. Below us, human staff began moving in synchronized groups. Not reacting to panic. Not reacting to danger. But anticipating movement. Predators were being guided, not individually, but collectively. Channeled through designed pathways. Not random escape routes. Not desperation-driven chaos, but structured flow. The animals were being herded. Together, I saw it then. The pattern. Every breach was leading towards central zones. Every escape funnel converged into controlled containment arenas. Every apex predator movement was being shaped into predictable vectors. This was not failure. This was choreography. A massive containment arena opened in the center of the zoo. Humans gathered along elevated viewing platforms. Not retreating. Not afraid. Watching. One human said, "All right, here we go. South Wing herd is almost complete." Another responded, "Bet the Ridgefang beats the Rivermore this round." A third laughed. "You're on. 10 credits says Rivermore slips on the corner turn." Betting on apex predators. In motion. During containment breach events. I could not reconcile it. I physically could not. Because then I saw the final piece. The predators were not escaping the zoo. They were being routed into an arena. A controlled competition space. They were being staged. For humans. As entertainment. And the humans were watching calmly. Eating. Laughing. Analyzing performance. I turned slowly toward Daniel Reyes. My processing speed degraded by 14%, then 23%, then stabilized at a dangerously low threshold. "You are watching them fight," I said carefully. "Yeah," he replied. "For entertainment. Mostly. And you are not concerned for safety." "Nah," he said, "we built it for this." That was the moment. The final misinterpretation collapsed. I had believed the predators were the danger. I had believed the humans were exposed. I had believed the glass was protection. I had been incorrect in every axis. The glass was not protection. It was limitation. Not to keep predators out, but to keep them contained within rules humans defined. And the humans were not observers, not victims, not even caretakers. They were operators. I looked back at the arena. Predators collided in controlled chaos. Human staff adjusted pathways in real time. Every escape attempt became part of a larger system. Every failure was absorbed into structure. And the humans watched, casually, like it was a sport. Daniel spoke again. Still calm, still eating. "You see why we like it." I did not answer immediately, because the answer had already formed, and I did not want it to be true. "Yes," I said finally. He nodded. "Cool." And below us, the zoo roared. Not in panic, not in failure, but in performance. And for the first time since arriving, I understood the real question was not, how are the predators contained? It was, what would happen if the humans stopped watching? I had made a critical error. Not in observation, not in data collection, but in assumption hierarchy. I had assumed the structure of power was vertical. Predator above prey, containment above threat, observer above subject, human above enclosure. All of that was incorrect, because the system I was witnessing at the zoo was not vertical. It was circular, and humans were not outside it. They were the center of it. The arena below reached its peak state. 3 apex predators remained active within the central containment field. The Ridgefang, fracture-adapted terrestrial hunter. The Rivermore, amphibious armored ambusher. The Sky Shearer, flight-capable strike predator with bone-blade wings. Each of them in any natural ecosystem would have been classified as apex. Each of them in isolation, capable of collapsing entire food chains. Together, they were a catastrophe waiting for physics to agree. And yet, they were not uncontrolled. They were not rampaging. They were being guided. The humans had activated what they called full arena mode. The walls of the enclosure shifted. Not upward, not outward, but inward, reconfiguring terrain in real time. Platforms rotated, water channels redirected, elevation changed dynamically. The predators adapted instantly. Of course they did. That was what apex organisms do. They adapt, they survive, they overcome. But the environment was adapting faster. I watched as the Rivermore attempted an ambush from a submerged channel. The channel drained mid-charge, redirected. The predator collided with dry terrain, momentum broken, immediately funneled into a new engagement path. The Ridgefang attempted to breach a wall segment. The wall was no longer there. It had become a slope, leading downward, directly into a convergence zone. The Sky Shearer attempted aerial dominance. The ceiling panels retracted, then reformed into controlled airflow barriers, not stopping flight, but gidding it. I felt something deeply unsettling form in my cognition matrix. This was not defense. This was orchestration. The humans were not reacting to predator movement. They were completing it. And then, the final layer activated. A soft tone echoed through the arena. The predators paused. All three, simultaneously. Not from fear, not from exhaustion, from recognition. The humans had synchronized something. A pattern, a behavioral trigger sequence embedded into the environment itself. I turned to Daniel Reyes. "What is that sound?" I asked. He didn't look away from the arena. "That's the reset cue," he said. "Reset? Yeah." He pointed downward. "Watch it." The predators moved again, but differently now. Less chaotic, less erratic, more structured. They were being paced. The Ridgefang engaged first. It lunged toward the Rivermore. The Rivermore countered. The Sky Shiro descended. All three collided in controlled escalation. But now I saw it. Finally, clearly, they were not fighting randomly. They were following a loop, a cycle, a learned pattern of engagement designed over repeated exposure. This was not combat. This was rehearsal. The arena was not a battlefield. It was a behavioral refinement system. The predators were not being defeated. They were being trained through interaction with each other under human-designed conditions. And humans were watching the refinement process like spectators at a performance. I turned slowly to Daniel again. My processing systems now running at degraded but stable coherence. "You are shaping their behavior," I said. He nodded. "Yep." With full environmental control. "Yep." "And you allow them to believe they are competing freely." He shrugged. "Mostly." I paused. "Why?" Daniel finally looked at me. "Properly. Not casually. Not passively. Properly. Because if they think they're free," he said, "they stay sharp." I processed that. Slowly. Carefully. "So the containment is illusion." "Not really," he said. "They are contained. And yet they believe otherwise." "Yeah." I turned back toward the arena. The Ridgefang executed a precise pivot strike. The Rivermore adapted instantly. The Sky Shiro exploited elevation variance. All of it fluid. All of it learned. All of it contained within invisible boundaries. And I understood. The glass was not there to protect humans from monsters. It was there to define where monsters were allowed to think they were free. The humans were not afraid, not even slightly, because fear requires uncertainty, and there was none. The predators were not uncontrolled forces of nature. They were managed variables in a system humans had designed to study, refine, and display controlled apex behavior under artificial constraints. I felt something collapse inside my analytical framework. Not breaking, simplifying, and then the final breach occurred. A minor structural anomaly in the southern control grid. A real one, not part of the design. A true failure. For the first time since arriving, something was not supposed to happen. A containment segment misaligned. A predator smaller, faster, untracked, slipped outside its expected route. It moved toward a public viewing platform. Directly. No redirect path. No behavioral conditioning. No prepared funnel. A genuine escape vector. I prepared for catastrophe. Finally, something real. The predator leapt toward civilians, and then a human child stepped forward. No hesitation, no fear response, just curiosity. The child looked at the approaching apex predator and said, "Is that one allowed to come up here?" Before I could react, a human maintenance worker placed a hand gently on the child's shoulder, moved them back half a step, then walked forward. Just one. The predator lunged. The human caught it, barehanded, not violently, not dramatically, just stopped it. Midair, redirected its momentum into the ground beside them. The impact shattered the flooring, but the predator was already pinned, controlled, breathing heavily, unharmed. The worker sighed. "Hey," they said softly, "wrong zone." Then tapped their wrist device. Reset breach. And just like that, it stopped struggling. Not dead, not injured, just corrected, returned to pattern. I could no longer maintain observational detachment. I spoke. "This species should not be able to do that." Daniel nodded. "Yeah," he said, "that's kind of the point." I turned toward him fully. "You are not at risk here." He smiled faintly. "Nope. You are not observers of apex life forms. Nope. You are not caretakers." He shook his head. "You are not contained within this system." He took another bite of his food, chewed, swallowed, then said, "Nope." I hesitated, then asked the final question. "Then what are you?" Daniel looked back at the arena, at the predators, at the systems, at the glass, at the chaos carefully folded into structure, and said, "We are the reason it works." Silence. Everything recalculated. Everything reclassified. Everything redefined. Humans were not vulnerable, not exposed, not ignorant, not reckless. They were the controlling variable the entire system depended on. The predators were not the apex. They were the exhibits. The glass was not protection. It was framing. And the zoo was not a place where humans observed monsters. It was a place where monsters learned every day that they were allowed to exist, only because humans allowed it. I made my final field note. It was the only one I wrote without revision. Humans are not surrounded by Deathworld predators. Deathworld predators are surrounded by humans. And beneath it, the enclosure is not keeping monsters in. It is keeping them honest. As we exited the facility, I looked back once. At the glass, at the crowds, at the calm, at the chaos, at the system pretending to be entertainment. And I finally understood the joke. Humans do not visit the zoo to watch predators. They visit to remind the predators who built the cage. And as Daniel Reyes walked beside me, casually adjusting his sleeve, he said something I will never forget. "Pretty good day, right?" I did not respond immediately, because I was still updating my definition of the word safe. And for the first time in my species' recorded history, I was not sure it applied to anything I had ever studied before.